Thank you so much for joining us on It's Time today. We are your hosts. I'm Linsly Donnelly, your citizen scientist and your longevity expert for midlife women.
And I'm Dr. Jen Wagner, physician and holistic performance expert. Welcome to It's Time, powered by Prosper. Just a quick reminder, the information discussed in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. We are not offering medical advice, nor are we entering into any type of physician or clinician relationship with listeners. Always consult your healthcare provider before beginning any new fitness, nutrition, or lifestyle changes to ensure they're right for you. Your health and safety is our priority, and let's keep it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all again so much for being with us today. Dr. Jen and I are, as usual, pretty excited about the topic because we decided to talk about it. But this is one that lands squarely in Dr. Jen's expertise, but it's one that, we all wrestle with, and I do too, because, I'm trying to be an advocate, take care of my own health. And so a lot of times I interpret that to mean I should only use things that are available to me without a prescription. Like I interpret self-advocacy and taking care of my whole health to mean like, I should just use supplements. I should try not to use a pharmaceutical. Like there's something in my head that's the last line of defense. And it's just this interesting polarization or divisiveness that Dr. Jen and I were talking about, like, where does that come from and why? And so if we could talk a little bit about the idea of this, how does pharma interact with non-pharma and the whole health equation? And then maybe what are some of the ones that are kind of the top demonized pharmaceuticals that people need to take a beat and think about a little bit more as a whole package of opportunity?
No, I think that's so well put. And it's super interesting. I'm going to kind of back up. When I was a medical student so this is really, it's 25 years ago. And I clearly remember it was right when Dr. Andrew Weil was kind of the first holistic physician coming out. And he happened to be on the faculty of my medical school. And so this whole idea of integrative medicine, like we kind of got a very early snapshot of what it was. And it was voodoo, it was fringy. It was all of the things because we had been the medical field prior to that had been very seriously ingrained in pharma. It was very Western medicine. And we didn't bring in a lot of these Eastern practices and these quote unquote more holistic practices. So it was this new idea that we could combine these philosophies, right? That we could take the best of what Eastern medicine had to offer and combine that with the medical advantages that Western medicine was making and really treat the whole person. And so that continued for a little while. And then all of a sudden, I think the supplement industry has exploded and these wellness people are coming out of the woodwork, and it has become this incredibly divisive environment where you are either an allopathic physician or a strong believer in allopathic medicine, or you're in this quote unquote wellness camp, and it's almost demonizing allopathic medicine a little bit, or you're deemed a failure if you have to go back into allopathic medicine. It just seems, at least what the media portrays and what you see on social media, you have to be in one camp or the other, and there's kind of no common ground. And it's funny because even with Prosper, we call it a holistic performance company. And when I talk about using medications, I sometimes get really strange looks. They're like, well, we thought you were holistic. And I was like, well, that means I'm talking about the whole person. And we have all of these tools, and I'm not against any tool if it's the right tool, And so it's just having the comfort and the conversation to say, what do I need as a person to meet my goals?
Yeah. Well, and I love one of the ways you framed it when we've been talking about this before that I love is like, hey, we start with lifestyle levers. Like that's job one. And everybody is after those. And we talk about them again and again on repeat, move, sleep, nourish, recovery, community, and keep going again and again and again. Mm-hmm. However, sometimes those are not enough. Right. And so
absolutely. I'm happy to share my own story, but even the other day, a LinkedIn post came across my network, and it was from someone who I actually don't know personally, but was describing this situation that, a very health conscious individual that had gone in for their annual physical and was doing all the right, quote unquote, right things, exercising, sleeping, eating well, taking their supplements, etc. And yet blood pressure was elevated, and blood pressure continued to be elevated, and physician recommended blood pressure medication. And this individual was so upset. I mean, not at the healthcare provider, but just was like, I don't want to take that, etc. And I just, part of me was like, wow, what a great time to be alive that we actually have that tool to offer you. We have a really safe, efficacious, well-studied, low-risk medication that is just going to absolutely synergistically amplify all the work that you're doing. And I said, in my own personal situation, my dad had his first heart attack in his mid 40s, second heart attack and double bypass in his mid 50s. And I mean, I could eat a little better. I will admit, that's my hard, but I'm active. I sleep. I've learned to control my stress level better. All of these things. My cholesterol's a disaster. There's only so much I can do from a lifestyle perspective. And I know we've done deep dives in cholesterol, and so much of that is genetic to begin with. I was like, I went to, had deep conversations with my healthcare providers. I didn't fit on any of this normal screening tools. And we all decided that I needed to take a statin. And so I think that doesn't mean I take a statin and go eat fast food every meal because I can justify it because I'm on a statin. It means I still do the work, but the work was never going to get me to the place that is really going to impact my health span for that metric.
Right. So that's a great example. And I feel like there are a number in that category. So Dr. Jen, as we're thinking about it, what are kind of the top, ones that you hear about in the medical profession that are kind of demonized, and they really have an opportunity to be an integrated solution instead of a no?
It's kind of funny. I think it's most of the medications that exist around treating cardiovascular disease, which is kind of ironic because it's the number one killer of men and women. And yet we have demonized the medications that are the most efficacious, most well-studied, have the best safety profile. I was laughing with a friend. She'll recall the story if she's listening to us, that I said, I could tell you to go out in that field and pick that plant and eat it, and you would do it. But I tell you need a prescription drug and you're really anti it. And I said, let's talk about that mindset a little bit, and about why when we are trying to live healthy lives, feel like it is a failure, or we're so against reaching for that or accepting that prescription when it's been given to us. And so I do think, statins, they've gotten a bad rap. I think they're one of the most well-studied, most efficacious medications that we have. They've been around for a really, really long time. That is not to say that some people don't have serious side effects from them, but people also have serious side effects from taking certain supplements. And so I do think that, and especially we've talked about cholesterol again and again, and we won't go into it now, but there's a huge genetic component to your cholesterol profile. And we know as women that our cholesterol profiles change drastically through perimenopause. And so I think that is a place where medication can be incredibly beneficial, and is probably the only way for people who seriously have elevated cholesterol to get it down to levels that we know are associated with better cardiovascular health. I think blood pressure is the other one, especially for midlife women. I think we don't check our blood pressures enough. And I know we've done a whole podcast on this. I think we feel like if we are not able to control our blood pressures through diet, exercise, stress reduction tools, whether that's breath work, meditation, all of those great things that are super helpful. But if we're still coming back with elevated blood pressure, some of that is hormonal change. Some of that, again, is the way our blood vessels genetically are designed and react. It's the way we metabolize certain and produce certain substances in our body. And I'm not going to get into the biochemistry, but we only have so much control over that. And our lifestyle levers, for some of us, we can't pull them enough to get the impact that we need. So again, it's not saying I'm going to put salt on everything I eat because I'm taking this blood pressure medication now, so I'm safe. It is, I'm still going to do all the work, but guess what? This is just going to really, again, amplify the results and help keep me healthy and help me reach my goals.
Yeah. As you were describing that, like, hey, I'm still going to do the work, but I am also going to be appreciative that there is a support in that work in this tool called the pharmaceutical. It does remind me a little bit about the conversation we're hearing more and more in these longevity circles about GLP-1s, and
Yeah,
are they potentially in that camp? And I know we don't have the answer for that right now, but I do want to put it out there for people if they are thinking about tools in the toolkit for a certain condition, specifically if it's not diabetes, that there are things that they want to talk to their medical practitioner about versus just reading the polarizing media and saying, "Oh, I'm never going to do that." Psychedelics is another one in that category for certain conditions. It's just like being the role of your own quarterback in your life is, you may not know that that's your role, but it is your role. In that role is incumbent upon you to look at all the tools on the table and work with the advisor you trust to figure out if they're right for you to bring into your solution set.
absolutely. And I think, you brought up, I think, a couple classes of medications that are getting a lot of attention right now, and the good, the bad, the ugly, all in between. GLP-1s, and so these are our Ozempics, Manjaros, some of these weight loss drugs for people who are, truly overweight, obese. They are life changing. And I think that's who those drugs are approved for right now. And the potential to decrease or eliminate diabetes in those populations, decrease heart disease, the cognitive benefits. I mean, a lot of these benefits that we're seeing that were unexpected. I think, again, the hard part with some of these drugs is we see the benefits when we're on them. It's unclear how to get people off of them and what happens to people when they come off of them. I think, they are starting to be used in different settings. And I know I've changed my thought process around this a lot, that, there is probably a entire population of people that are not in this, this horrible term we use called morbid obesity in the healthcare system,
Yeah.
which is a certain number on the BMI chart, but are still in that 20 plus pound overweight pre-diabetic situation where maybe it's a complicated relationship with food, have some of these other pretty significant roadblocks to starting to really access the lifestyle levers in the way that they want to. And so there are healthcare providers that are starting to prescribe kind of the lower end dosing of GLP-1s to help the brain kind of mouth stomach
Yeah.
disconnect a little bit, so people don't have those appetite cravings. They don't have that emotional relationship with food because they're not as hungry. So they can then make better choices around food in a much more stable environment, get the confidence to start the exercise routine, and really does lead to some great long-term health impacts because they have the motivation and they have the toolkit to really invoke those lifestyle principles, which maybe were always prohibited with that emotional relationship with food or not being able to overcome that first step. And so I think that they are, again, we're not sure how long to leave people on them. We're not sure the side effects of coming off of them. So I think we're learning more and more. But I do think that that is another area where we're actually starting to see a benefit of those drugs. You mentioned quickly, some of the psych drugs, which I know in today's environment are getting a lot of news. And I think for those of us in our lives who have people that are impacted by mental health disorders, those drugs can be life changing, life altering, life improving for many, many people. And I think they are unfortunately getting a lot of negative press right now. And I again worry that that makes people feel like they're failures if they need them.
Yeah.
And, I know we both have people in our inner circles that
Yes.
have really benefited from the availability of some of these medications.
Absolutely.
And so again, it's always, if you're hearing all of this stuff in the media, it's a really good idea to go talk to your trusted practitioner, because I truly believe this, taking 35 supplements that we haven't studied and we might know how one works, but we don't know how it interacts with all other 34, versus taking one or two really well studied pharmaceuticals if you really need them. In my medical mind, it's kind of a no brainer for my personal decision. And granted, we all have to make our own personal decisions, but I think I just don't want that idea of if you need a pharmaceutical, you're failing.
Right, right. Well, I think it's the idea that if you need a pharmaceutical, you're failing. Okay, no, you're not. But it's also this idea of if you see yourself as a healthy, clean living advocate, that is not mutually exclusive with taking a pharmaceutical that is targeted for a condition that you cannot impact with your life levers. And so, or taking psychedelics if that's the way you're going to impact the mental and cognition challenges. All of these are working in partnership with the expert in that field. But taking anything that has been documented, great science behind it, on and on and on, in partnership with a licensed, credible practitioner is part of the toolkit you have permission to build for yourself to have a more joyful, more energetic existence.
Exactly. And I think the word joyful is really, really important in that. And, I have had friends and acquaintances who have gone on these crazy restrictive, I don't even want to call it a diet, like live in these crazy restrictive food environments is what I'm going to call it, to try to lower their cholesterol to a point it's never going to happen. Like the degree of which, we can maybe get 5 to 10% lower. And if you need to lower your cholesterol 40%, it's almost impossible to get there with diet alone. And so, and I'm sure there's one or two people that will call me out on that. And yes, there are case studies where people have done it, but for the majority of the population, it's just not going to happen. And yet these people just are so insistent that they can do it. And I'm like, how is that fun to eat that way? How is that enjoyable? Like and you ask them and it's terrible. Like, they're like, this is terrible. And I was like, so what is the big deal? Like, the disconnect is still a little hard for me to understand, to be perfectly honest with you, and so I think that, and again, I would say that with, some of the antidepressants too, that people are, are so quick to label others that are using those. And I think those drugs have great efficacy for people that need them, and I think that there is, again, I hate the connection of failure with needing to pursue some of these opportunities. And I just really, I guess that's the one message, if I could hammer home, is it's not a failure. It's not a weakness. And thank goodness that we live in a time and in a country where we have access, hopefully not all of us, but there is high quality healthcare, and there are these very inexpensive, very safe options to really amplify what we're working on.
Yeah. And so I think the other point you've made is pharmaceutical isn't mutually exclusive with clean, holistic, healthy living. So they can work in tandem. So the supplements and pharmaceuticals is often what's happening in somebody's pantry.
100%. And like I said, there are always individuals that use things as a crutch, right? That, I don't want to clean up the way I live, so I'm just going to take some drugs to counteract this and that. And that's their choice as well. I think, in this wellness setting, and people that are listening to this are probably in the camp of trying to live the healthiest, best lives they can. And so I just, again, want to say that thank goodness we have access to this. I'm an anesthesiologist by training, and I don't think anybody would walk into the operating room and say, please just put me to sleep with some supplements.
Yeah.
They want the drugs, right? And so it's just interesting, this disconnect when it comes to, and I think this is kind of a failure of our healthcare system too, is that we don't talk about prevention enough. And we're using a lot of these as preventatives. Like, you're doing everything right. Let's bolster that preventive nature a little bit more, or that preventive advantage a little bit more, with bringing down your blood pressure a little bit, with bringing down your cholesterol a little bit more than what we can, with getting some weight off while you are lifting weights and eating the protein and doing the right things to build lean muscle. There are tools that can help with these things.
Well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to kind of lay that out, because I feel like it happens a lot in the conversation where it's an either or dynamic. And the assertion here is it's an and environment, and, enjoy that and take advantage of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. If you liked what you heard and you got some tips on how to live better right now and for the long haul, please help us reach more midlife women. Please share and rate and like this show. And we can't wait to continue the dialogue with you on our next episode. Until then, thank you. It's time.